Okay, let's dive in then. You've probably seen it around, maybe know someone going through it even. This trend of, uh,
Twilight divorce. Yeah.
right, Twilight divorce, happening much later in life.
Hmm.
After decades together, 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years.
It's a really noticeable shift, socially speaking. I mean, couples who've built whole lives together, right? Raised families, shared so much history,
Hmm.
and then they decide to separate. Just when you sort of expect them to be settling into, I don't know, a quieter phase, maybe.
Exactly. And the reasons you hear, well, they sound pretty standard on the surface, don't they? Things like we just grew apart, or maybe our personalities,
Yeah.
they just clash too much.
Yeah, those are definitely the common explanations you hear. And I mean, they make sense on one level. Relationships change, people change.
Sure, they do.
Uh,
But here's the thing that kind of nags at me, the puzzle maybe. If those differences, those personality clashes, were really that big, that fundamental,
Mm.
well, why get married in the first place?
mm, Good question.
And maybe even more importantly, why stick it out for so long? Through all the hard stuff, raising kids, building careers, everything.
It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? If incompatibility was the root issue all along, you'd think it would come to a head much, much earlier.
Right. So is there something else going on? Something like deeper? Today, we're looking into a really interesting perspective based on the material you brought in, Dr. Lee Minsub's Genome Compass.
Ah, yes. It's quite a fascinating approach.
It looks at all sorts of social things, technology like AI, genomics, but also really human stuff like relationships, but through this genetic lens.
That's right. Dr. Lee's work tries to understand these phenomena by looking at the interplay between our genes, epigenetics, how genes are expressed, and, of course, our environment and experiences. It's trying to connect the science with maybe a more philosophical view of why we do what we do.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, really, to try and unpack this idea from Genome Compass. Could our genes, our genetic strategies for things like attraction and finding a partner, could they actually help explain this whole journey?
Yeah.
From that first spark to staying together for years and then
Yeah.
sometimes this later life split.
It definitely flips the usual script,
Oh.
which tends to focus purely on emotions or conscious choices. From a biological viewpoint, finding someone, having kids, it's fundamentally about passing on our genes. That's the underlying drive.
Okay, so reproduction is the main biological goal, initially at least. How does that link back to who we actually find attractive, like that first intense pull?
Well, this is where the genetic strategy, according to the source, gets really interesting, maybe even a bit counterintuitive. The book argues that powerful initial romantic chemistry, it isn't necessarily about finding someone genetically like us.
Really? Different. Wouldn't similar feel, I don't know, safer, more compatible from the get-go?
Not if the goal is genetic survival, apparently. The core idea presented is that mixing diverse genetic material, leads to stronger offspring. Think better immune systems, maybe more adaptability. That diversity gives the next generation a better shot.
Huh. So that feeling, that sometimes totally illogical spark you feel with someone who seems completely different from you, the introvert drawn to the extrovert, the meticulous planner to the spontaneous one, that could actually be our genes kind of yelling, hey, this difference, it's good for the kids.
That's essentially the argument, yes. The material suggests humans often feel a strong pull towards individuals with what it calls heterogeneous or just distinct genetic makeups. It's almost like a subconscious radar for genetic benefit. People have looked into things like smell preferences being linked to immune system genes, though it's complex. But the point here is, initial attraction often targets difference as a strategy for successful reproduction.
Wow. That's quite something. It suggests the very things that make someone seem exciting, captivating, maybe even a little bit challenging early on, their different vibe, their unique way of looking at things that might just be the surface sign of valuable genetic diversity.
Exactly. And according to this perspective, that genetic drive, it worked. It led to attraction, forming a couple, marriage, and importantly, raising children successfully. We partnered with someone who brought different genetic goods to the table, fulfilling that primary biological mission for that life stage.
Okay, right. Mission accomplished on the reproduction front.
Yeah.
The kids are grown. Maybe they have their own family starting. So what happens then when the couple enters that later phase of life?
This is where the whole biological context shifts, quite dramatically according to the source. Once people are past their main reproductive years, kids are raised, maybe post-menopause for women, that initial biological driver, the one pushing for genetic diversity, it starts to fade. The urgent genetic task is, well, it's done.
The evolutionary pressure lets up.
Precisely. And the material points out that other needs start to feel much more important. Things like just stability day to day, emotional calm, having a reliable partner, someone you feel truly understands you. These become really central to well-being in the later decades.
Again, I can immediately see the potential problem there. Those differences that were so attractive before, now they can become difficult. If what you crave is peace and quiet, maybe that high-energy spontaneity that was thrilling at 25 just feels disruptive or, frankly, exhausting at 65.
You've hit it exactly. The very difference that felt exciting and served a reproductive function earlier, it can now become a major source of friction, annoyance, even conflict, just everyday stuff, communication styles, habits, how you like to spend your time, things that were maybe overlooked or even found charming when the focus was raising a family and that biological drive was strong. They can become really grating when the relationship needs to function differently.
The source material apparently uses phrases like the fluttering hearts of attraction turning into annoyance and conflict. That's quite a shift.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? And the argument is that this is when people, maybe without even realizing the deep biological currents underneath, start voicing those reasons we talked about earlier. We just don't connect anymore. Our differences are just too big. I need peace, or I need someone who just gets me.
So that feeling of just not fitting together later on,
Hmm.
it might actually be a direct result of the genetic strategy that worked for reproduction no longer matching the needs of the companionship phase.
That's the core argument put forward in Genome Compass, yes. It suggests a spouse effectively plays two roles, biologically speaking. There's the reproductive partner, chosen largely for genetic diversity to make healthy kids, often meaning choosing difference. And then there's the emotional companion, the person you navigate life with long term, providing stability, understanding, connection.
And the potential crunch is that the person who is the ideal reproductive partner might not automatically be the ideal emotional companion.
That's the tension the source highlights. Someone who offered great genetic diversity, creating that initial intense spark, might also have fundamental differences in personality, values, or just daily rhythms that lead to friction when the main job of the relationship shifts from building a family to just being companions. On the flip side, maybe someone genetically more similar, more temperamentally aligned, wouldn't have generated that same initial fiery attraction, but might actually be a smoother fit for long-term emotional harmony.
This really does put a different spin on the whole Ziva phenomenon. It suggests it's not just about people failing or falling out of love because of, I don't know, external pressures or boredom.
It offers a deeper sort of biological backdrop. It suggests that even if you feel worlds apart from your spouse now, your younger self was probably powerfully drawn to those exact differences because unconsciously they served a vital purpose for the family you were going to build.
So the unhappiness later, it isn't necessarily a sign that the first choice was wrong or the initial genetic strategy failed. It's more like reaching a new life stage where a different set of needs, biological, psychological, comes to the forefront.
Exactly right. The material frames later life dissatisfaction or divorce, at least partly, as a kind of struggle. A struggle to shift from a relationship primarily based on that gene-focused reproductive strategy to one that needs to be centered on emotional companionship, mutual support, and finding common ground for the years ahead.
Understanding this idea that different genetic needs might drive attraction versus long-term comfort, could that actually give people new ways to think about their relationships as they evolve over time?
I think it certainly encourages that kind of awareness. It suggests that making a long-term partnership work might require very conscious effort, an effort to bridge the gap between the qualities that serve the raising kids phase and the qualities needed for the growing old together phase. It's about acknowledging there might be this inherent tension baked in by our biology, as the source describes it.
So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway we can pull from this really fascinating, maybe slightly unsettling perspective from Genome Compass?
I think it suggests that the friction we see in later life marriages, these deep differences that suddenly seem impossible to overcome, they might actually be, in a strange way, an echo of the very genetic strategy that brought the couple together decades earlier. Those differences that boosted genetic diversity for the kids, they can become the battlegrounds when stability, peace, and feeling understood become the top priorities.
It adds such a complex layer, doesn't it? Beyond just conscious choice, shared memories, There might be these deep, ancient biological programs influencing our closest bonds.
It certainly seems plausible from this viewpoint. And maybe thinking about it this way offers a different angle, not about changing who people fundamentally are, perhaps, but about understanding the biological forces that shape the union in the first place. And then consciously working to redefine the partnership, moving from that past reproductive mission to a present and future focused on companionship, on navigating those foundational differences with understanding.
That's a really powerful framing. It takes some of the blame, perhaps, out of the equation for later life struggles. It's not just personal failure, but maybe navigating the intricate biological path of being human.
It definitely pushes us to look past the surface reasons and consider what deeper currents might be shaping our lives and relationships.
So we'll leave you with that provocative thought from the material we explored today. First attraction, now conflict. Our love and separation designed by genes.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Just how much of our deeply personal lives might be steered by biology we're barely conscious of.
Definitely a lot to mull over there. Thinking about attraction, relationships, how they change over a lifetime. Something to take away from this deep dive.